the finance bill is still front and center of conversations. And beyond that, in terms of participation, when it comes to putting some of these things into law, let's start with Planned Parenthood, first of all, as you're the regional director for Africa. What does Planned Parenthood do?
Okay, so Planned Parenthood Global is the international arm of Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Okay, we're not IPPF. Some people get confused us with International Planned Parenthood Federation. What do? We work through partners, okay, in 5 countries currently, under the framework of the Maputo Protocol Action Plan, Article 14, Section 2C. There, that beautiful document encompasses all of women's rights, okay, socioeconomic, cultural, etc. But Article 14 is reproductive rights. So we support partners that have a need and interest in a particular aspect of reproductive health rights. We don't dictate the agenda. They've come to us, and so it's the gamut. It can be HIV, AIDS, FGM, child marriage, whatever impacts reproductive health rights of girls. Our particular focus are young people. Okay, we've recognized the huge gap and the lack of attention paid to young people's needs, so that they understand the responsibilities, right, of parenthood, or they lack access to information to prevent unintended pregnancies, or get STDs, etc., so that they're not now planning for their futures. So in a generic sense, that's what we do. So there's the advocacy support for policies, right? Positive policies. You talked about the finance bill coming out. Most of the countries we work in, yes, young people need to know what's in that bill. What should they be advocating for if it's not there? Then there's also the service delivery that we used to do, but we no longer do. However, what we've changed in our new strategy is training providers to be advocates, okay? Youth-friendly services, okay? Because again, the stigma associated with young people trying to access information and services. So that's the second bucket. The third is innovation, okay? So that, all the different innovation, young people are, have the aspirations, and they're very, should we call it creative? And so how do we inspire that innovation, right, so that they can live healthy lives? This is about healthy lives, so that they can be honorable citizens and contribute to their country.
Absolutely. I mean, put like that, then you're talking about making life livable for a subset of people. After life is livable, then you can then contribute to your society or your community.
And your family. Okay, what about the unmet needs of family? I forgot to mention, so we currently Planned Parenthood Global Africa. I'm the Africa Regional Director. We also are based in Latin America and Africa. For Africa, we're working in Senegal, Burkina Faso, Benin, Kenya, and Uganda. We used to work in Nigeria. We had some programs in Ethiopia and other parts of the continent, but again, that was based on funding, etc.
As a layperson, when I hear the word Planned Parenthood, all sorts of things go through my mind. So I have to ask, what does Planned Parenthood look like? And of course, I'm going to ask you, what does unplanned parenthood look like? Correct.
Well, we know what unplanned parenthood looks like, right? The numbers are there. The maternal morbidity rates, right? The deaths from harmful practices, etc. So Planned Parenthood is about equipping young people, girls, with information, accurate information. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Young people are on technology and they're being misinformed. So what we try to do is create those platforms where they can access accurate information. So it's about access to accurate information so you can plan for your future. Okay, so it's about access to services, youth-friendly services, right? Because young people are, they don't know where to go for information. Parents, we know, we in Africa, we're a conservative society, okay? We've got, part of it is we work also with parents in certain parts of West Africa where the social cultural norms heavily influence the values, okay, of young people. And so it's like, okay, parents, in order for your children to live healthy lives, right? They need the information and the services. This is not just about promotion of careless sex. No, it's about if you're going to have sex, you need to be responsible, okay, and understand the consequences. And that's the goal of our program, to make sure that young people are equipped with information and they know where to find services if they're in trouble, or if they intend to have families, then these are the services that should be available to you. If not, that's where our advocacy would kick in, and looking towards the policy reform.
Sure.
We work at all levels. We do not work in our countries in the capital cities. Like in Burkina Faso, we're beyond the environs of Ouagadougou.
Yes.
We're in the communities where the needs are of the marginalized. So again, working with the social, cultural, traditional practices. We work with the chiefs in those West African countries that are Muslim majority, okay, because we understand you can't make that penetration. So, sir, unplanned parenthood, it has caused problems for young people, unemployment, okay, they're on welfare, because, you have the high number of school dropouts. You have, again, they're not equipped, so they are now in the marginalized sector of work, the grey markets, or criminal enterprise. And what we've seen in other parts of the continent, because I worked there most of my life, is jihadism, this attraction, okay? Then you've got the rapes, right? The unintended pregnancy. What happens with those children? What happens to those women? And even the young boys, even the young boys. Let's not forget the young men that now have been, indoctrinated. I'm very saddened by what I see happening in Sudan, South Sudan. That's a country I'd worked on. And it's been continued. In fact, even many countries, there's just been continuous conflict. I remember in Liberia, the young people I worked with never knew peace. In fact, they don't even know what democracy till this day. That was a conversation I was having with a young person. They don't understand what it is to live and work in a democracy because of this continuous conflict, the ebbs and flow of it. So that's where now the unplanned parenthood comes in those types of situations where young people are not equipped with information and don't know where to access accurate information or the services.
So for your work to be effective, it means therefore that you work with other partners.
With
other partners?
Of course, yes. We work through partners. We just provide the technical assistance and the funding, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You see, because when you talk about reproductive health, and the understanding, the ways and tools of it. See, what comes to my mind is the direct correlation between what we're now referring to as unplanned parenthood or planned parenthood and the understanding that the parents would have. Because if you have parents who are inadequately informed, they will bring up their children the turmoils of insurrection and the turmoils of civil wars notwithstanding.
Correct.
But you'll have a situation where these young people are growing up in an ecosystem where to begin with, there's inadequate information. Now, if you provide them with information, there's the likelihood that they will probably have more information than their parents do.
Well, we ensure that our programs, where they're taught in school, like where we work with partners pushing comprehensive sex education, there ought to be a parental accompanying program, right? I don't say PTA, but you also have to bring in the teachers, the educators, etc. So no, we don't just focus on the children; we focus on the parents too. Particularly in West Africa, I think we've just started the work here in Kenya through our youth engagement. Again, it's for the partners and the young people to tell us. We do conduct, I don't want to call it an opinion poll, let's call it an assessment, rigorous survey to ask parents, right, and teachers and adults, okay, how do you talk to young people about these issues as they come up? And so that informs the discourse and perhaps the training, the exchange of information. So yes, the young people, yes, because they're these are technological based. We go to where the young people are.
Right.
So we use technology, okay, because we recognize that, okay, those are the platforms that they use, and that's how we have to make it exciting. However, we do recognize the need for adult, should we say, interaction and information, and most certainly including the parents. We can't work in many of these communities without including not just the parents, the traditional leaders, religious leaders, etc. So and when I say traditional, I mean cultural chieftaincies.
One would assume that in different communities there's a different issue that requires this kind of advocacy.
Correct.
The issue that you're dealing with in South Sudan, for example, is not the same issue that you're going to deal with in Burkina Faso.
Correct.
In Kenya, it's a totally different issue.
Yes.
So then how then do you use these tools to make sure that young people are interacting with the information?
Yes. We are, again, using the technology so that they can talk to each other. There are various technological platforms that we are in the process of creating, because we recognize you cannot do youth movement in one country alone on this continent and looking to expand throughout the world. So yes, they talk to each other. We make it a point through our youth leaders. We work through regional organizations, like in West Africa is the Ouagadougou Partnership for the Francophone countries. In this part of the world, we're looking to the East African community, the youth parliamentarians, and all those infrastructures that are in place, but really in looking for that collaboration and ensuring that our platforms that we build, we've got the Facebook page. I can't remember all of them, but I do recall the Facebook and of course the Twitter and the Instagram, where these young people are talking to each other. They're doing it already, right? Music, fashion, etc. So what we endeavor to do is to really create space on those different platforms. But we have created our own platform, and my colleague, I'll share the Twitter handles and everything a little later. And the idea is that now that we're on this side of the continent, we're bringing all those best lessons, those practices, to bear. Yeah.
So there's a big conversation that's being had in Kenya right now, and many would argue that of all the bills that have been, brought up in the recent past, and maybe recent past could go to 5 years, that this one currently has attracted the most interaction. And I'd be interested to know, are young people involved in this interaction as concerns then livelihoods, taxes, involvement in what I like to call participatory governance? Do we see that there is that heavy interaction with the other subject areas that we talked about? And then if not, how then do we start to bring people into being part of your own governance? Exactly.
It's really important. And I know that, during election time, I used to work with the NDI, doing electoral governance, and particularly trying to attract young people to understand the need to vote. Otherwise, you can't exercise your right. Okay, then you don't, that accountability mechanism is not there. So it starts with, for young people, understanding that, yes, your government has made these commitments, okay? And what do they mean to you, okay? If they mean something to you, then you need to understand the commitments, your rights, and how to exercise your rights constructively and engage, okay? And engage in a constructive manner, okay? So that you can achieve your goal. So so there are trainings that we provide through partners. Again, we work with a number of human rights organizations across all these countries. In Kenya, it's the Kenya Human Rights Council. And the idea is to demonstrate to young people how to exercise their rights, not just sloganeering that this is my right, but how do you unpack it and exercise it? And now you've got this bill and policy. You want to hold your leadership accountable. What does that mean? How do you do it? What are the mechanisms, etc.? So that's really important. And budgeting is really key. When I worked in Southern Africa years ago, that was the number one project that I worked on with young people. I forget the name of the project, but it was about budgeting and young people understanding the national budget, the key articles that pertained to their future. Okay, it's not just education, but of course, the health, etc. Not all that money being necessarily put in youth and sports, which is important. Don't get me wrong. However, you need to know what particular aspects will affect your life, right? And so that's part of our planning, right? Putting the planning in Planned Parenthood. Understand, your destiny, and how are you going to control your destiny if you don't understand all these policies? Okay, including the budget. Okay, that's but one. And then the key thing that we have really been pushing these past 2 years under our new strategy is the intersectionality. Okay, too many governments just put health siloed. Okay, it's over there. No, it intersects all aspects of governance. Okay, you cannot grow your economy if you don't have healthy people. I've worked in Eastern Europe where I've seen young boys and girls with babies dying across the Mediterranean, okay, or washed up, and then walking across Europe to get to wherever. Okay, that's an issue. That's something that is in the budget, right? Employment. When we talk about employment, what does that mean to you as a young person? Okay, so, and how do you engage, right? How do you find those employment opportunities or the education to equip you for those employment opportunities? Yeah.
Do we find, just looking at the work that's been done, because we're trying to localize this conversation in terms of what's happening here.
Yes.
But then just going a little bit broader, do we find that if you have, because we know that young people today make up the majority percentage of population.
Oh, yes, they do.
Okay, 70%.
Yes.
And this is, it's on the continent, it's around the world.
Yes.
Except in some where you have an extremely older population and a very, very young population.
Yes.
Do we find that young people being more equipped by knowledge then lay an impact on the decisions that are made at a government level? Is that a case that has been established? Has it been seen somewhere to make a case for being involved?
Yes. Because
we also know that the world has changed in the sense that we're looking for a microwave solution. So if something does not produce a result, the likelihood of somebody being involved in it reduces significantly. So do we find that young people being more knowledgeable, being more engaged in communities and societies, then translates,
of course,
to better or more inclusive governance?
Exactly, and and amplifies their voice, right? It's really exciting that there's that section in the budget. I had an opportunity to glance at it yesterday. So empowerment, as we know, is key. For every walk of life, and in particularly young people, being my generation, we call it youth bulge. Okay, that I understand that's not the politically correct term anymore. But the idea again, yes, of course, armed with knowledge, information. That's how all of us got where we were, right? You gain the experiences, and they have to know what they need to do to promote a healthy future. Okay, it's not a one-way street. It's not a top-down approach. There's need for that bottom up. Young people have their needs and aspirations. If you read the background of the Maputo Protocol, right, the documents that brought it into being, there was a lot of conversation about young people's aspirations and needs, given the conflicts across this continent. Kenya is primed. Kenya is a middle-income country. I did my education in this country, and from my primary school, secondary, I was in Ghana, right, as an African, able to go to the US and succeed, right? So the standards have slipped, okay? They have slipped, okay? And there's not enough investment made, not just in education, but health. Okay, health. COVID was an eye-opener for all of us as far as that goes. And so now young people, instead of sitting back and being quiet, okay, how do you seize this opportunity to amplify your voice, make your needs known, and work constructively through the mechanisms that are available? If that's what the government has said in this budget, these are the opportunities, then how do you innovate and create space so that those other needs are met, and to do it in a constructive, yet disruptive way, no longer just accepting the status quo. Young people are doing this. We've seen this protests, right, across the continent, not just in Kenya, demanding economic rights. Okay, but parts of that is you have to be healthy, and part of that, we argue, we argue part of planning is, the family planning. Yes.
Indeed. As we are looking at issues, discussing important issues when it comes to youth and participation, one of those being the finance bill, and saying, all right, how are these advocacy conversations taking place to make sure that young people are actually involved? As we look at issues, Achieng, around the world, Arab Spring, for example, I look at the issues in Egypt that essentially started with somebody who was 24 years old and said, you know what? I'm invested in this conversation. The leadership cannot continue to do this at our expense. But this was somebody who clearly understood and was participating. And I guess the question is, how then do you move from being able to harp about things on social media as opposed to then getting actually involved? Like if we did a poll today, how many young people are involved in the public, call it whatever you want to call it, but how many young people are involved in public participation when it comes to how it affects their lives? Meanwhile, one of the big things in this bill affects young people. One of the big things is that the taxman is going to come for you.
Correct.
For some of the content that you're creating, which is creating an income for a lot of young people in Kenya today.
Correct.
So if you're not involved in the conversation, how are you then asking for certain things to be done?
May I add to your question? It's like the government has looked at the numbers and they've realized that there's a population in this country that we refer to as young people, and there are many. And since there are many, there's work that many of them tend to do that perhaps we haven't captured adequately. So let's cast this tax net wider and see how we can capture them. Now, we have a public participation understanding about these matters. Now, for young people to participate effectively in this, how does an organization such as the one you work for ensure that this empowerment you speak of actually puts them in that pivotal position, because they are big players?
Correct.
Very, very big players.
Correct.
How does the weight of their numbers reflect in their participation?
So let me say what we have done, right, in other countries, not Kenya, in Senegal and Burkina, is we have policymakers as champions. In fact, that's what took us into Benin. I mentioned that we've just recently started working in Benin. We have policymakers that have heard of the organization's partnership model and have asked us to come in and help move the agenda. And to answer your earlier question, we've been in business 50 years in Latin America and in Africa, Planned Parenthood Global. And primarily it was we were asked to come and help promote the policy, formulation around, reproductive health, right? And again, the beautiful document Maputo Protocol was there, and so there's just need to actually domesticate it in the countries that we work in. And that was the entry point. Again, that entry point, right, that domestication requires the policymakers. Okay, that's not an exercise civil society can do on its own. The advocacy aspects of it are there, but then you also find your policy champions, and that's where the conversation starts, right? Because the policymakers now we create those safe spaces where those conversations can be held, the needs are articulated, and then also that engagement is facilitated so that young people understand in order to get this seat at the table, you need to come equipped, right, with your information, your rationale, proper rationale, and also to showcase the results of, the data speaks for itself in terms of, the criminal enterprise, the lack of employment, the high school dropouts, the unintended pregnancies, the welfare, increased welfare. And so in order for, as the gentleman has said, to capture this population, the politicians have understood their role, but young people also need to understand their role. And that's where the training and the educational programs we provide through our partners come in, so that they're armed, equipped, because in Senegal and in Burkina and we're just recent, and in Kenya too, we've had partners. RHNK was one of our organizations, Reproductive Health Network of Kenya, that we founded. So the training and educational programs are there to engage the policymakers, but to be the experts, right? You bring in the experts, right, that can speak to the issues and make those linkages. This is where that intersectionality. So it's not just seen as a health issue. This is a socio-economic issue. If you're going to grow your economy, like you've said, you've got this youth bulge, you've got 42% of your population on this continent under the age of 24, they're going to grow up, right? So if you want a tax base, right, then they need to be legitimately employed, not following the criminal enterprise way or trying to just stay in that gray market area, so to speak. So all that needs to be part of the education process and training. There are many trainings available, some online, some whatever, and it's a worthwhile investment. This is where the government ought to invest in continue to educate its young people so that, again, they can plan their future and their destinies so that they can be citizens and understand the need to contribute, why there's nothing wrong with paying taxes. Okay, it's an education process to understand taxes. You were talking earlier about mortgages, owning, renting for 10 years and whatever. Yeah, that's something that, you're taught, right? Before you purchase a property, you go through some sort of counseling session to understand what it is, right, supposedly to own versus renting, etc. So it's the same thing with young people about their responsibilities and engaging constructively on the budget, understanding that if you didn't vote, then you've got a problem. But if you voted and you've got a representative, a senator, a local council person, how are you going to engage them to meet your needs? Yeah.
Oftentimes, we, again, looking for solutions. Whose ultimate responsibility is it to make sure that young people are engaged in the conversation?
I think what do we say in Africa? It takes a village, right? So it's a village. There are many actors, okay, not just the parents, right? It's your culture, the so-called leadership depends on who you consider leadership. So it's not just relegated to one person, and then there's also a responsibility on the young person to fight to educate themselves, empower themselves, right, so that they can constructively engage. So successes, you asked that question, are where young people are engaging with their county leaders, their chiefs, their religious leaders. They've been able to win them over to understand why access to reproductive health information and services is important for the community, okay, whatever the community.
I think you've worked all over the globe. Do you have examples of places where the training and the interfacing participation that your organization has had with young people has resulted in young people being an integral part of the decision-making process in communities?
I honestly want to say Burkina Faso. Yes.
Walk us through. Tell us what happened and how exactly
that's where our Billy Now, our youth engagement program started. And there again, it was about, a state of hopelessness that young people were in, and they just wanted, they're looking for a better life, right? They're looking for improvement, but yet the statistics were off the charts in terms of unintended pregnancies, etc., lack of access to youth services. So again, at the time, the political, the political ecosystem was very friendly and open to that conversation because the alternate was jihadism. Okay, so that education, training, and the activities that were launched by young people themselves, and particularly young men, okay, that wanted opportunity. They didn't want to migrate. They want to stay in their country. And so they saw this as an education program. Now, I'm not going to lie. Employment was their top criteria. Okay, is this going to lead to employment? How? Because, that's the priority of young people across this continent. Yeah, their health matters. However, it's not their priority. So we've had success in Burkina because the young people are at the table. They have influenced and integrated language into the policy, into the national accelerated family planning policy in Burkina Faso, and that has been our young people with our training, with the champions. Okay, we didn't do this alone. Again, like I said, we've got advocates, we've held intergenerational dialogues. That's another successful thing. The first ever that were held in Burkina Faso were motivated and implemented by these young people. We just supported and provided the technical assistance, and of course at each of these functions or activities, we invite the policymakers, you invite the politicians, you invite the religious and customary leaders. That's a country where the Association of Muslim Religious Leaders are part of the program. They're one of the partners that we work with, and we're seeking to do the same here in Kenya, at the coast. I apologize, I can't remember the name of our partner right now, but we've stood up an initiative in Kenya where, working multifaceted angles so that young people have voice through all the different levels, because it's not enough to just say you're going to deal with the policy.
Yeah, which was another question that I had, because if you look at schooling and you look at the age of socialization, we were starting as young as 3 years old, right?
Yes.
In terms of then the concretization of beliefs and things like that.
Yes.
Where does education play a role in participatory governance later? Because we're saying you're interested in the things that are going to make your life better, isn't it? As a young person.
Correct.
So I'm still coming back to this finance bill here, because it plays on so many parts of life. And right now, I don't know that we can say that young people are engaging to make sure that their views are heard when it comes to this one bill that could affect so much of what they do.
Yes.
But I'm also imagining a situation whereby if at grade school level, they started to be taught about the importance of being involved in what your government does at a later time in life.
Yes.
Where would we be?
It's called civic education. We used to have it, I believe, and I just think that just needs to be strengthened and modernized to today's world. Okay, what it means, again, to vote, right? That's the first step, right? When you become of age and now you're getting ready to vote, okay? What does that mean? Okay, and that with the responsibilities of being a voter, voting a particular person into office, right? What's that relationship look like? What are the demands you can make, etc.? So yes, of course, it should be taught in school. For every walk of life, there's preparation, training, education, and why not on reproductive health? Okay, and so it should start there. In Uganda, that's the project that the partners, the program that we've supported for years is comprehensive sex education in schools, because of the high number of dropouts and everything that was happening, teachers defilement, etc. And so education is really key. However, again, we work where the needs are, where our partners identify the gaps. So, that's not something that, of course, we work in Kenya, but here it's about the youth, getting youth to equipped so that they are employable and they're good citizens. And of course, that will require a lot of civic education, working through CSO, rights-based organizations, to talk about sustainable development. Okay, what does that mean? SDGs are out there. Can we go and ask young people, okay, what are the SDGs that matter to you? These are things that, should be taught, right? Because, with all the issues of climate change, right? Now climate change is a curricula now. But, the health that matters so much, HIV, be it, name it, STDs, etc. Young people ought to know, okay, you engage in this. This is what happens to you. Where are you getting the money? Where are you getting the services? If there are no government services, can you afford private services? So it matters, because this is about planning your life and your livelihood. You need to know how you're going to do it, unless, you're a trust fund child. And even then, that access is really important, and that information, that adequate, and knowing where to get the information. Right? This bill requires a lot of unpacking. Okay, so I saw the section on youth agenda empowerment. Okay, now we need to go with our people, unpack this so that we can say, young people, okay, this is what your government has said. Okay, this is what is being offered under various youth sports, whatever this, that. And how do you, as a young person, constructively engage with your policymaker? Not necessarily so that you are invited to the table. And this is what happened in our other programs, is our young people were invited to the table. And when, like when going to Geneva for the periodic reviews on human rights, there's a section for young people. And in Senegal, in particular, the parliamentary and different policymakers that we work with ask for what have been the successes so that they can include it in the report. So it starts like that.
How do you work with governments?
We work
or government agencies or government departments or government ministries?
We have to cultivate that relationship. We need that buy-in. Okay, we recognize that we can't move and be successful if we don't, try to cultivate a partnership to co-create this space. Okay, so we're not trying to do it on our own. So in each of the countries, again, looking for champions, and it doesn't necessarily mean at the top level. In Kenya, I believe it's at the county level that the colleagues have been working for a number of years under our program that was called Closing the Gap. Which was successful 8-year program, and there the services were provided, youth access to friendly services in 4 parts of the country. So we make it a point to make sure that government is aware, and we want to collaborate, if not partner.
How then do you ensure that you don't duplicate what other agencies that may claim to do what you're doing also do?
Or even government itself.
Yeah, luckily I come from an international agency background, USAID, so I know about this scanning the ecosystem and talk to everybody and make sure that we're not trying to duplicate efforts, and we rigorously try to ensure that our partners too are not double dipping, and so that which we know is difficult, this development arena. However, we try to work on an integrity basis and make sure that we talk to everybody. That's part of the conversation. We're going to now in Kenya really increase our power to convene all the different partners working in this sector, so that we continue to talk to each other.
If you looked at your crystal ball and what has been happening in Kenya recently, what is likely to happen in terms of engagement with young people here today, with the knowledge, limited or not as it may be, what is likely to happen with this bill in terms of youth engagement?
I think young people's eyes are opened, right? I think this series of the need for empowerment, economic empowerment, I think is really key. I mean, look, the world is facing a recession. I think you asked for examples, right? I'm happy to say that the best examples for our work, I didn't answer your question earlier, have been coming from Africa and not necessarily the US. You see what's happening in the US. It's not really happening, but the best examples have really come out of Africa as far as our work is concerned. But as far as Kenya, look, we're excited that youth want to be empowered. They want a different direction, the training programs that one of our partners is organizing. We're working, and also our lens to working with one of our partners, NILAB, is the commerce, right? Looking at enterprise, innovation. So that has got young people excited and understanding that they need to equip themselves and skill themselves. This budget is very key given the recession. It's a global recession. What does that mean for all of us? Okay, we have to pay attention, and so I think it's again, that's a key message for us. Okay, because it's all about money, right? Because you can't do anything unless you understand how to manage your money and your relationships. Okay, so that's really key in order to advance youth movement, right? And that's what we're trying to do, is build a youth movement. So in order to do the two, you must be armed with the accurate information. You must know how to constructively engage with the policymakers. And when I say constructive, I mean you come with your data, your facts, etc., not just protesting and sloganeering, right? You come to engage, make your case that will resonate with the policymaker. And then also the employment aspect is really key. This intersectionality is really key, because employment is underemployment, lack of employment is a problem across this continent, and particularly in Kenya. Kenya is a middle income country. I don't want to start throwing.
So we keep being told.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's exactly my feeling. But do we see that? With the number of underemployed young people, this high school dropouts, the defilements, and that's not even, I'm forgetting to talk about the increased spike of suicides, young people committing suicides, the mental health issues, and leave alone gender-based violence.
There's a lot to unpack, and still to continue having conversations about in terms of where then young people must be involved.
They must be involved. Sustainable development requires inclusion of young people because it's their future.
Indeed. A good note to wrap up on this conversation with Achieng Akumu. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Achieng is the Regional Director for Africa at Planned Parenthood. Thank you for being with us this morning. Still a lot in terms of inclusion, participation when it comes to young people and the current conversations about future and livelihoods in Kenya today. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to talk with you again in the future.